In Gaza, where 8 Palestinians, 7 of whom were babies, have died from exposure to the winter weather, leading to hypothermia. Israel has blocked humanitarian aid, including blankets and adequate tents. So, what is hypothermia? Well, the condition occurs when the body loses heat faster than it can generate it. The human body needs to maintain a core temperature of about 37 degrees Celsius, which it does through digestion and through movement. And it must stay within a narrow margin of around 1 degree, which allows vital organs, including the brain and the heart, to function. Let's speak now to Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan, who's a paediatric intensive care and humanitarian physician. He made several trips to Gaza and joins us live now from Amman in Jordan. Doctor, great to have you with us. Thank you for your time. Now, the point is here, the temperatures may not necessarily be sub-zero, but the cold temperature can still kill if you're not warm, particularly if you're a newborn baby.
Yeah, certainly. So hypothermia is not uncommon in young infants if they're not properly bundled or kept in a reasonable temperature. And that's because as your surface area to volume ratio increases, which is the case as children are quite small, so the younger the child, the larger their surface area to volume ratio, you're more likely to lose heat, but also you don't have the glycogen stores to produce heat. So you don't have the sugar or the sugar stores and the subcutaneous fat that allows you to generate heat when you need to. And so what ends up happening is these children get very cold, their blood sugar drops, and it changes a lot of things within their circulation, and it can directly lead to death. And that is not unexpected. And that is why young infants are cared for so tenderly by their families with blankets and warm environments, and something that people in Gaza have been stripped of every means of doing for their children. A member of my family had a baby just before Christmas, and I'm about 200 kilometers away from Gaza right now. I'm in Amman, Jordan, and it's been too cold to take the baby out. And when we do take the baby out, the baby's bundled and is kept warm. It has been bitterly cold here, not unexpectedly bitterly cold, but it's wet. And if you get wet, you freeze. It's just how biology works. If you cannot,
and of course, as far as Gaza is concerned, all this is compounded by the lack of food, the lack of nutrition.
Absolutely. So malnourished children and infants are at a much higher risk of becoming hypothermic and also becoming hypoglycemic. Those two things are very closely linked. And so children in Gaza, even under, with all the resources that, we might have a couple 100 kilometers away, are still at more risk of becoming hypothermic just by virtue of their malnutrition and the fact that they're so emaciated. I mean, there was a study I think it was published just a few weeks ago, that showed the average amount of weight loss within the first half of this genocide was over 18 kilograms per person, the mean weight loss. And so 18 kilograms. So I shudder to imagine what that weight loss is if you take the full length, so the full 15 months. And that's for mostly adults. You think about small children and the impact that is having on their growth, the impact that is having on their ability to keep warm. And it's all really... I struggle to find the words to describe how horrific the situation has become, and how deaf the world has been to repeated cries from humanitarian workers, from mostly from Gazans themselves. I mean, they have documented on a daily basis their own genocide and have been killed for doing so. You think of the number of journalists that have been killed. We just skirted past, Christmas Day, 5 journalists being killed in a press-marked vehicle outside Kamal Adwan hospital that was subsequently raided, burned, and the director of that hospital, who has been pleading for his people, pleading to protect the hospital, pleading for international protection, we know has been beaten and is now in Israeli detention, probably being beaten We know at least 4 healthcare workers have been tortured to death in Israeli prisons.
And as you say, it's incredible how the world turns a blind eye to it. But Dr. Tanya, what do you say as a pediatrician observing this and knowing Gaza, as you do from your own experience, Gaza at war from your own experience? You know, you've talked about it before, the deep emotional impact it had on you. What needs to happen now?
I mean, in response to your first question, as a pediatrician, but more importantly as a human, knowing that children are freezing to death, there have been at least 7 infants that have frozen to death this past week, 8 people in total that we know of, right? We have no means of recording these things. We're watching as children and their parents wade through waist-deep water to collect their dead, and with no means of rewarming, with no means of accessing adequate nutrition. 15 months into this, as a pediatrician, but more importantly as a human, I am watching children die in every possible means they could, whether it's violence, cold, hunger, disease, all directly as a consequence of a very carefully architectured Israeli military campaign that has been enabled by the United States and other countries that are turning a deaf ear and a blind eye to the very clear warnings from different international courts, from different humanitarian bodies, whose role is to prevent these types of atrocities from happening. And
Indeed.
the next steps are very clear, Nick. The next steps are very clear, and they've been clear for over 15 months.
Indeed. And who would have thought we'd still be talking about this at the beginning of a new year, at the beginning of 2025? Dr. Tanya Haj-Hassan, we do appreciate your time and your perspective on this. Thank you so much for joining us here.
Thank you for having me.
Make sure to subscribe to our channel to get the latest news from Al Jazeera.